Hey guys, thanks for joining the first podcast of Burton TD. Today we're joined by one of our fraternity brothers, Adrian Fedque from the Bitter Birds and Philly Influencer. Adrian, I really appreciate you joining us on our first podcast here, buddy.
Oh, dude, you know me. I'm excited to be here. Anything to help out a fellow Phi Kappa Theta member. Both of you guys, part of the awesome Phi Kappa Theta fraternity from Temple University, obviously. And as you guys know, host of the Bitter Birds, Eagles reporter for PhillyInfluencer.com. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Adrian. So, before we guys get really carried away here, Tony, this is our first one, so I think it probably makes the most sense for all of our, future million listeners down the line if we did a little introduction of ourselves. So, Tony, would you mind just giving a bat and lead off here and giving a little introduction?
Yeah, sure. Well, Brendan and I actually have a very similar background. We both grew up in Bethlehem, PA, which, for those of you who don't know, is about an hour north of Philly. So we've always been associated with Philly sports. At least I have. Brendan has never been a Philly sports guy. Brendan likes a bunch of weird teams, but that's okay. And then, Brendan and I met in ninth grade, went to high school together, and then also ended up at Temple together. Ended up getting the same degrees, having a lot of classes together. Stayed close ever since, and now we're doing this. We like to talk about sports, so here we go.
Yeah, pretty much nailed it there, Tony. Adrian, you mind giving a little background on yourself, and then I'll back third?
Yeah, sure. Went to Temple University, studied broadcast journalism there. Always wanted to be involved in the sports media, which is what I'm doing right now. Before I was at Philly Influencer, I was at a place called the Sports Network where I covered a Super Bowl every year I was there. So that was a lot of fun. They were sponsored by Fathead, so pretty big company, but they got bought out by Stats LLC. So that's the reason why I am at Philly Influencer right now. So there you go. There's a little brief background. Went to Temple University with you guys, obviously. So there you go.
Awesome. Thanks, fellas. And guys, I'm Brendan Albert, co-host here with Tony. As Tony mentioned, grew up in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, went to Liberty High School. I think Tony and I would both say we were average at the very best athletes in high school. I think that's a kind way of putting it. But then, as Tony mentioned, went to Temple, got my degree in sport management with a concentration in collegiate athletics. Had the opportunity to intern at IMG Academy, worked under Chris Winkie, worked a lot of NFL training, and now I work for the country's largest scouting service for high school to collegiate football players out here in Vegas. So either way, guys, I appreciate you guys listening to this, but let's get moving. No one really cares about us. You don't hear about us talk. So, guys, the big first thing I wanted to kind of cover with you, we had a first weekend of wild card games. What are some of the things you took away? Adrian, why don't you lead here?
Yeah, I thought it was a weekend of football that wasn't really well played, but there was some exciting and some drama, especially with that Kansas City-Tennessee game. Kansas City, once again, they blow a big lead under Andy Reid, 21-3. Oh, man, that's awful. I was a little bit surprised about the Falcons winning because it was more the fact that the youth showed. I didn't think the youth was going to show like that for the Rams. I thought they would look a lot better against Atlanta. They basically gave that game to the Falcons. Pharaoh Cooper, 2 fumbles there on special teams. That's probably the best special teams unit in the NFL, so that was surprising to see. I thought the Saints looked like the best team on Wild Card Weekend. I liked Drew Brees. Michael Thomas was huge in that game. I'm really looking forward to that matchup between Michael Thomas and Xavier Rhodes this weekend. But overall, I don't know. I don't know what you guys think. I didn't think the football was that well played. And it kind of, comes back to this season and how I've been, kind of viewing this year. I don't feel like there's an elite team. There's that great team this year. And that's why I think this playoffs could be wide open. And we saw underdogs cover spreads, and we saw underdogs win on Wild Card Weekend.
I mean, I don't really have much to add. I agree with Adrian. It wasn't the best weekend of football we've ever seen. Because I kind of look at most things through a Philly standpoint, man, that Chiefs game was just we've seen that before with Andy Reid. I mean, I don't. It's kind of mind blowing to me. You're up 21-3. You have the leading rusher in the NFL, and you only give him the ball 4 times throughout the last 3 quarters.
Yeah, that's a joke.
4 or 5 times. I mean, the final play tally was like 38 passing plays called to 12 runs. I mean, that's just absurd. Not to mention your best receiving threat in Kelsey got hurt. And again, like I said, it's not like you have some scrub back there running back. The guy had 1,300 yards rushing this year. So just watching that as a guy who, watched Andy Reid for 15 years in Philly, it was just like, man, we have all seen this before.
Tony,
I mean, Andy Reid's a great coach, but it seems like playoff time year in and year out, he overthinks himself. And like I said, we've seen that script before.
I think Andy Reid is also the best way to coach himself in and out of games. I agree with you, everything you just said there, Tony. The biggest takeaway I had was how much better the NFC is top to bottom than the AFC.
Ooh, yeah.
Leaps and bounds. I mean, I felt like when I was watching the AFC games, it felt like I was watching a bunch of Thursday night football games, with the quality of the games just being so poor. And the biggest thing I took away from it was, yes, I understand that the Bills and the Jaguars both made the playoffs, but both of these teams are going to take quarterbacks early in the draft next year. So as I'm watching it, I'm thinking about guys like, Baker Mayfield. There's no question he's going to be a first-round pick. Now, guys like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, these guys are going to be first-round locks now, in my opinion, because the Bills and the Jags, even though they're going to pick probably into the 20s, they still have a need at quarterback, even though they made the playoffs.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you there. And that's a really good point. And, the AFC games, man, I know, like, we've seen teams in the past make the playoffs that are like 8-8. We've seen division winners go 7-9. But that Jaguars-Buffalo game was atrocious. How many missed opportunities is Blake Bortles going to miss? How many open receivers is he not going to see? It's awful. The Jags should have won that game pretty handily, I thought. But that's what happens when you got a bad pickle.
No question, Adrian. And I felt bad because even if you listen to the broadcast, and Tony Romo is doing a fantastic job. Let's give him credit there. He's awesome.
Yeah.
But he was doing everything in his power not to say, damn, Blake Bortles, you just suck, dude. Because, he was like sugarcoating it. And at the same time, it's like, look, we all know really what's going on here. Bortles had more rushing yards at one point than passing. That's not a positive statistic to have as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, a couple things. I think you started by saying the NFC is dramatically better than the AFC. I completely agree, but if you would have said that to me halfway through the season, I would have thought you're nuts. But you're totally right now. I mean, it really comes down to quarterbacks. You look at Matt Ryan, he could win you a Super Bowl. Drew Brees has won a Super Bowl. Cam Newton can win you a Super Bowl. Goff, the jury's still out, but I think most people have come around and realized he's a pretty darn good quarterback now too. Really, the only quarterback in the NFC, I hate to say it, that can't win you a Super Bowl is Nick Foles. I hope to God I'm wrong, but I mean, come on. But yeah, and
I said this.
Going back to the conferences and which conference is stronger. The NFC, I do believe, is very much up for grabs for any of the 6 teams. Now, obviously, we've had some wild card games and teams have been eliminated, but you look at how the playoffs kind of shake out in the NFC. Normally experience kind of wins out, but we see here in the NFC, the 5 and 6 seeds are the ones that are the ones with the experience. Usually you don't see that. Minnesota, I mean, they've been in the playoffs a couple times the last few years, but they haven't won a game. The Eagles, obviously, that's kind of new territory for Doug Peterson and some of those guys. They have been in a playoff game before under Chip Kelly, but still a while ago, and that was back in 2013. Even the Rams, obviously. I mean, that's new territory for them. Jared Goff, Sean McVay. So the NFC, man, it's very interesting. I'm curious to see how things really play itself out.
I totally agree, Adrian. And, to kind of put this all into perspective, think about this. We saw 3 teams this weekend in the NFC play on wild cards who have MVP winning quarterbacks. And then in the AFC, we saw 2 teams that won't have those same quarterbacks at the start of next season in all likelihood. I mean, that really just kind of sums up the big look with the difference. And then I guess the question, fellas, is what are we looking forward to most? Adrian, I know you mentioned Saints and Vikings.
Yeah, that's going to be a great game. Obviously, a rematch of Week 1 where the Saints really struggled. It was a 29-19 scoreline, but that game was barely indicative of how beaten the Saints were in that game. I think it's going to be tough for the Saints offense, obviously. Kamara out of the backfield. I mean, you got those great linebackers in Kendricks and Barr. And I'm really curious to see Michael Thomas go against Xavier Rhodes, 2 of the more physical players in the NFL. Xavier Rhodes might be the most physical corner in the NFL, and Thomas comes off a big game against the Panthers. So I'm really curious to see that matchup between those 2 guys. I mean, a lot of great individual matchups in that game.
Tony, how about you? What are you really excited about this weekend?
Well, to hit on the Viking Saints, I actually think the Saints are going to win that because of one guy, Drew Brees. I mean, I understand Vikings have a great defense. Vikings have a lot more weapons on offense than people realize, and Case Keenum has played really well this year. But Drew Brees, to me, is almost in the same echelon as Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. I mean, if he's not there, he's a notch below him. And it wouldn't surprise me with the skill position he has around him that they make another run this year. Because, like you guys have mentioned, the NFC is wide open.
Yeah, I think this is another unfortunate repeat of last weekend where both NFC games are probably going to be really good, and I think both AFCs aren't going to be great. Now, I think the Jags defense certainly can stand toe-to-toe with the Steelers, but I just think we're going to get to a point where we're going to go into halftime of that game, and it'll be 10-3 maybe, and then all of a sudden the final score might be 28-3. Because I just don't see that the Jags are going to be able to consistently move the ball and keep that defense off the field. And we heard, Antonio Brown's coming back. I agree. I think that game's going to be really great. But I think the best matchup is going to be the Falcons and Eagles. I'm just really excited to see what has Nick Foles been able to do in that 1 week off. Is he able to really develop and move forward? So let's talk local. Let's talk Eagles, Phillies, guys, or Eagles and Falcons, guys. What are our concerns? What are our advantages are on our knee-jerk reaction?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a slugfest. And the prediction I've already made, I've gone with 13-12 Eagles. And here's part of that. So you look at the points scored for Atlanta from last year to this year. They've gone from scoring 540 points to 353. That is a huge drop-off. And the big drop-off is in the red zone production. So you go from being 8th last year to 23rd this year. Steve Sarkisian, the offense really isn't that much different from Kyle Shanahan's. But Shanahan, the difference with him is he likes to use a lot of motion. And with motion in the red zone, the thing that you can do is you can outflank a defense before the ball is even snapped. The way, whether it's some jet sweep action, fake that, you have them dart out in the flat, whatever that may be. The Falcons, for whatever reason, were scoring points at will last season, and it's not happening this year. Julio Jones only has 3 touchdowns on the season. So that's where I'm going to be looking to see what the Falcons do in the red zone. And if they keep settling for field goals like they have the last month, this is going to keep the Eagles in the game. And that crowd is going to be fired up, obviously, for 60 minutes. So Foles, I'm with you, Brendan. I'm curious to see how he rebounds. I know that Doug Peterson has said in his press conference last week that he watched Foles play against the Saints a couple years ago in that Chip Kelly wild card playoff game. And he said that he wants to dust off, quote unquote, dust off some of Chip Kelly's stuff from that game, some of the stuff that Nick Foles is good with. So I don't know how much you can really change in 2 weeks, but it sounds like they're going from, all right, they were going to just keep the offense the same under Nick Foles as it was with Carson Wentz, but now it seems like they want to try and do something different for Saturday's game. So I don't know how much different it might be, but we'll see, man. We'll see.
God, I hope it's a 13-12 game. I would love that, because if it's a 13-12 game, yeah, I definitely think the Eagles come out on top. Unfortunately, I hate to be the Debbie Downer, but I don't have a lot of confidence in Nick Foles. I'm sorry, I don't. I think Nick Foles is one of the better backups in the league, and I think Nick Foles can win you games. And at the end of the day, I think this game is a toss-up. But if I had to go in my head, I think the Falcons win, unfortunately. Basically because I think Matt Ryan's going to make more plays than Nick Foles. And I know Julio Jones doesn't have the numbers that he normally does, but some tells me Julio Jones is going to go off. I still don't trust the secondary. I know I should at this point, but I'm sorry. I just feel like it's going to be a Matt Ryan, Julio Jones game.
Do you know who's going to stop? Do you know who's going to stop Julio Jones? The defensive line.
Well, okay, that's a great point. That's a great point. I hope you're right, man. But I mean, Atlanta's O-line is pretty good though, and I also feel like their defense is better than people give them credit for. I mean, it's a coin flip, but I don't have confidence. Sorry.
Can I toss this at you before Brendan speaks? So I want to say this. So I agree with you about the O-line. I love their tackles. Jake Matthews and Ryan Schrader is probably one of the more underrated tackles in the NFL. Alex Mack is a Pro Bowl center. But I think where the Eagles can fare well, the interior of Atlanta's offensive line. We just saw Aaron Donald make mincemeat of their right guard. Their left guard, they don't have Levitre right now. He's hurt. So Ben Garland is their left guard. So think about it like this. So Aaron Donald just dominated them, right? Well, Fletcher Cox is going to be on Schweitzer. And if Alex Mack wants to help out on Schweitzer, that leaves Timmy Jernigan one-on-one against Ben Garland. And the other thing that we've seen in recent weeks, on third down blitz packages, Jim Schwartz has lined up Brandon Graham as a defensive tackle. So Brandon Graham going up against Ben Garland, that's obviously going to be a matchup in the Eagles' favor as well. So I think you can attack the interior of the Falcons' offensive line. I think that's where the Eagles are going to have success defensively.
You know, this is.
I agree.
Go ahead, Tony.
That's their would be their path to winning.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I agree. That's the recipe to success.
But with that said, there shouldn't be a single play where Julio Jones is left one-on-one.
That's true. That's a good point.
You can't argue that. I mean, I totally agree there. I mean, when we look at Vegas, this is the closest spread of any of the games this weekend. Atlanta's favored by 3. That's the closest of any game this weekend. In comparison, the Patriots are the highest spread with 13.5. But I agree. Look, Julio Jones is going to get his. Okay,
yeah.
And let's not make it sound like when Julio Jones goes for 120 and a TD, let's not make it into this, oh my gosh, the defensive backs are horrific. No, you're going against one of the greatest freaks in the NFL. Julio is going to get his. You almost have to just kind of say the old expression, you can't stop him, you only hope to contain him. And that's inevitably what's going to happen. I agree with you, Adrian. D-line has to eat. They just flat out have to play well, and you got to run the ball exceptionally well, limit the offense there from Atlanta, keep the defensive line fresh so they can continue to get after it. I'm going to give Atlanta the nod. 13-12 it just seems very unrealistic, that low, but I understand why you're thinking that, Adrian. I think I'm going to give Atlanta the nod 28-24, but this is going to be a good game. I think it's going to come down to how well can Philadelphia win first down. and that's going to be crucial, especially in the run game. Can you get Nick Foles in third and under 5? If you can put him in situations like that, you at least give him multiple options. The defense can't just drop into their cover 3 like Atlanta plays so much of, because if you let Atlanta play the cover 3 and you let Keanu Neal run a course in that quarter flats coverage and take away Zach Ertz and then let him fly downhill, you're going to ask for a lot of trouble there. So I'm taking Atlanta, but I'm not as confident as it sounds like you guys might be.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if the Eagles can run against an 8-man front. And, that's something that Doug Peterson talked about in a press conference as well. He was like, yeah, we can run against an 8-man front. And that's something we're going to be talking about in our film study tomorrow. Brendan, I'll show you some plays from last year when the Eagles beat Atlanta 24-15. They ran the ball 38 times for 208 yards. And against some of those 8-man fronts, 8-man boxes, what the Eagles like to do is they like to sometimes bring on an extra lineman, right? So you have 6 offensive linemen in the game. You'll also have the 2 tight end sets. So you might have 8 men on the line of scrimmage at times. This is what the Eagles did last year. So if you have 8 men in the box, but you also have 8 men in the line of scrimmage, you can block those 8-man boxes. What do you think about that, Brendan?
I know what you're saying, Adrian, and you're not wrong, because you're going to face the 8-man box. And I think that goes right back to something I mentioned earlier. Can you win on first down? That's really what this is going to come down to. I don't think they can. And I just have a hard time. I agree with Tony's earlier comment. I think Atlanta's defense, no, they're not elite, but they're better than most people give them credit for. That front is very good. The back half is very, very athletic. I don't think Eagles are going to be very successful. But if they do win, we're going to see the Eagles are going to be +3 almost every single time on first down.
Yeah. The thing last year was a lot of counter plays and a lot of misdirection, because last year, Deion Jones, Devondre Campbell, they were rookies. And you could get away with that stuff because they were aggressive. They were over-pursuing on some of those plays. Well, this year, they add another year to their experience level. And obviously, Deion Jones, we've seen him really coming into his own the last month or so. I think he's been outstanding. But at the end of the day, Atlanta does yield 4.1 yards per carry. So that's not exactly that great. It's certainly, not the greatest number in the world.
Yeah, that's very fair, Adrian. Like I said, this is not an elite level defense. That said, Adrian, those stats also kind of lie a little bit because Atlanta's not playing a backup quarterback the other games of the year. So those numbers obviously are a little bit inflated, but I totally get where you're coming from there. I think the best thing you can hope for if you're an Eagles fan, like we participate, or we assume, I should say, most of our viewers are, hope for snow, hope for rain, hope for wind, hope it's nasty as possible to limit any type of vertical threat, and then just say, hey, can we be the more physical team?
Yeah, but I think it's going to be in the 50s from what I'm hearing.
To me, and this is probably oversimplifying it, but I think you'd both agree it's a quarterback league, and one team has Nick Foles and the other team has Matt Ryan. And in my mind, it's not – is the Eagles' defense better than the Falcons' defense? Yeah, but not by leaps and bounds. It's not like they have a huge advantage in other aspects of the game that will make up for Matt Ryan versus Nick Foles. And again, I know it's probably oversimplifying it, but that's just kind of how I look at it.
Sometimes you don't need to, make it this complex. One guy's a MVP winner, the other guy's a backup quarterback. It is what it is. But let's move across 11th Street here, and let's go over to Wells Fargo, talk a little bit about the NBA. So it's crazy to think that we're about the midseason point at this point. So, guys, let's kind of talk. What are some of your, MVP level players that have really taken leaps and bounds in your mind?
Is that me or Tony? I guess I'll go. All right. So James Harden has been the big one for me this year in the NBA. I thought he had a great year last year too, but didn't win the MVP obviously. But this year the Rockets 28-11, second in the West. So right now James Harden's probably the MVP of the league. We'll see how the second half unfolds. In terms of the hometown team, the Sixers, 19-19. I know a lot of people in Philly a little bit disappointed about where the Sixers stand right now, but Vegas, I believe, they didn't project them to win that many games. It was like 41 or something. So to see this, going on in Philadelphia, I don't think it's that surprising. I think where they make the big leap is next year. This is the first year that, Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, all those guys have played together. So, that's kind of how I'm viewing the NBA right now.
Well, I disagree with you about Harden. I think the MVP is clearly LeBron. I think LeBron has been the MVP probably the last 8 or 10 years, if we're being realistic, simply because LeBron can dominate both ends of the court. Harden can't. I mean, yeah, Harden's gotten better on defense, but come on. Same thing with Curry. I think it was kind of a joke when Curry won MVP over LeBron. I know the numbers were better, this and that. The team was better, this and that. But to me, it's kind of like when Shaq was in the league and Shaq was at his peak. The fact that he didn't win MVP every single year was kind of a joke. The whole league kind of knows he's the MVP, but they just don't want to give it to him every year. But, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think he's the greatest player of all time. Yeah, in terms of the Sixers, it kind of pissed me off when maybe it was like 2 weeks ago, they were at 14-18, and everybody wanted to fire Brett Brown, and everybody said they weren't going to make the playoffs. Fucking relax. The Sixers, I guarantee you the Sixers are still going to make the playoffs. Fultz is going to be back relatively soon. It's not going to be tomorrow, but I think we're going to see him in the next couple weeks. And I expect the team to be significantly better in their final 20 or 30 games than they were in their first 20 or 30 games. Let's not forget, they have a rookie point guard who's never really played point guard before, still figuring shit out and still dominating on most nights. Embiid, I mean, the entire team is young other than Redick. They're still finding their cohesion. They're still figuring out how to close games. If you really look at their stats, the biggest issue they have is turnovers. Well, a young team is only going to get better and turn the ball over less and less as the year goes on. Not to mention, if and when Fultz gets back, outside of Simmons and Embiid, he'll really be the only other guy who can truly create his own shot. I mean, Sarge kind of can at times, but everyone else is snipers. Redick is a shooter. Covington is a shooter. McConnell is a decent backup, but he can't create his own shot. He can set people up. I think people are downplaying how big of an impact Fultz is going to have and forgetting why he was the number one pick and forgetting why the Sixers traded to get him and all this stuff. I think, Brendan, to kind of hit on your team, I saw the standings today, and how the fuck are the Heat 23-17? That's just goddamn miracle.
Eric Spoelstra is the most underrated coach, and I would argue professional sports, because this is the second year in a row where they have a team that, as a roster, they probably should be a lottery team. They barely missed the playoffs this year. They don't have a single all-star player, and they're currently the 4 seed.
They have, what's his name, Whiteside and Dragic, and literally a bunch of dudes I've pretty much never heard of. They have no business being 6 games over 500.
No, you're 100% right, Tony. And they're the 4 seed. Now, to be fair to the Sixers, I'm going to talk first about them. They're 500. Vegas started the year and said they were going to be 500. That was the over-under. So at least in the eyes of Vegas, they're doing exactly what they're projected to do. However, as Tony, you pointed out, they don't have their first-round pick this year. And, if you invest in a first-round pick, you expect him to play a lot. So I agree. I don't think that the Sixers are this underachieving team by any means. I think for them making anywhere from the 6 to the 9 seed, I think is still a winning year this year. If they finish below that, then I think it's fair to say, okay, maybe we didn't have as successful as a season as we had hoped. But I'm going to go back to MVP. There's no question it's LeBron. I mean, that Cavaliers team has gotten significantly worse, since the trade, and yet they're still in the top 3 in the East. The only other person I would entertain a conversation about being the MVP might actually be Kyrie Irving, because that Cavs team is 33-10, and he was supposed to be 1A, 1B with Gordon Hayward, and Hayward never really played this season. So for the Celtics' success, it's hard not to give a tip of the cap there to Kyrie Irving.
All right, I'm going to go back to the Sixers point and all that, and kind of what you were saying. I compare this season to last season of where the Timberwolves were. Timberwolves went 31-51. I think there's some similarities here between the teams. The Andrew Wiggins and Karl Anthony Towns. Obviously, this year they went out and got Jimmy Butler, but last year, Minnesota, they were trying to figure out how to win, trying to figure things out. And I think we forget that sometimes. We still have to trust the process here in Philadelphia. And part of this season is still trusting the process. We're still trying to figure things out. This year is still part of the process. We'll be fine. We'll be okay. Next year is the year that I think the Eagles, see, this is what we're thinking about right now in Philly. This next year is the year that the Sixers take off.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned Minnesota, because I know Brendan and I have been talking about Sixers Minnesota NBA Finals probably for like 2 years now. Certainly not this year, not next. Yep. Maybe 2020, 2021, 2022, somewhere in that range. Eventually, when LeBron falls off, and eventually when the Warriors fall off, or split up, or whatever happens, I truly believe that is going to be Sixers and Bucks are going to be the 2 top teams in the East, and the Celtics will still be there. There'll still be a couple other teams in the mix, but I certainly think Minnesota is the future of the West.
Yeah.
When State falls off. Yeah,
I totally agree, Tony. I think the other team that I like a lot of the parts that they have in the West is the Nuggets. I know they're a similar situation. They're still really figuring how to put it out, but they have a good young roster around them too. To me personally, guys, I am less interested in the MVP this year because I just know how dominant LeBron is, that he really deserves it year in and year out. And the award I am more interested in is the most improved player. So to me, in my mind, there is zero question the most improved player, and you could argue might deserve some MVP votes, is Victor Oladipo of the Pacers. I mean, he went from being someone who was labeled as the most overpaid player in the NBA with the huge deal he got from the Thunder to keeping the Pacers afloat, a team that shouldn't be, as good as they are right now, and he's leading them to a lot of wins.
Yeah, that's actually a great name. See, the first name that I thought of was Giannis when we were talking about most improved player. But it's kind of hard to argue Oladipo for the reasons you just said. I mean, people had been calling him a bust, and he's been awesome this year.
Yeah, finally playing up to that potential. I liked him out of Indiana, and then he just kind of never materialized until right now. Always been a good defender, obviously very athletic, and I'm glad to see him flourish right now. So good for him.
When we're at this point, we're right around the trade deadlines, right around the corners, and we're going to hear a whole bunch of names, start buzzing in the next couple of weeks. Guys, do you have any names or any teams that you would circle and say, hey, this team or this player really needs to make a move in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I know the name being rumored about right now isn't really a big name. He's not a superstar. But Mirotic from the Bulls is a damn good player that could really help whoever he lands with. I know the rumor right now is Utah. But, I mean, shit, I would like to see what the Sixers would have to give up to get a guy like him. I mean, he's your kind of your prototypical stretch four in today's NBA. He's kind of exactly what you want, is he not?
No question about it, Tony. I totally agree. Still has the ability to, play the small forward if you're playing a bigger lineup. Yeah, I think that's a fair one. I think the easy name to say, and it's just because it's the big, exciting name to say, is Cousins. And I think this is really where the NBA is kind of at a bit of a fault. the NBA trade deadline is usually it's about a week before the NBA extension deadline. I really wish the NBA would flip this rule because that would give the Pelicans essentially a week to say, hey, we didn't get the extension done with Cousins. We now have a week to trade Cousins. So unfortunately, I understand why the Pelicans are going to do. The Pelicans are probably going to, hold them ransom and say, hey, we're going to try to keep you all year and try to sign you. But unfortunately, there's still a very good likelihood that he moves on to the offseason, potentially the Lakers. If I'm the Pelicans, I don't play around. If I'm not 100% confident I can re-sign him, I'm going to trade him.
I think another name to watch. Yeah, go ahead, tell me.
No, I kind of completely forgot about Cousins somehow. And Brendan and I have mentioned this before. If Cleveland can somehow figure out a way to land Cousins, they actually have a shot at beating Golden State. But that's all I have to say about that.
I think the guy to watch out for is DeAndre Jordan from the Clippers. Obviously, the Clippers right now middled in mediocrity with the Chris Paul trade during the offseason, so they've fallen off. And the Cavs, I think, could be the team to watch out for there with Jordan.
I've heard that, Adrian, and maybe I'm crazy, but I don't see the appeal in DeAndre Jordan over Tristan Thompson, for example. I don't think that he's going to bring anything that Tristan Thompson doesn't do already. Yeah, DJ's probably a little bit better of a rebounder and block shots, but I don't think it's really worth it to trade for someone who's only a smidget better. That's why I'm saying if I'm the Cavs, I'm making a trade for Boogie. I'm not making a trade for DJ because I don't think he brings us anything different.
DJ would cost less, obviously. So I think, having that pair at the rim is why I like it. But that's just me.
Cleveland still has Brooklyn's first-round pick next year, don't they?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, I think that makes sense for both sides. If I'm New Orleans and I could get potentially the number 1 overall pick next year for a guy I'm not going to be able to re-sign, it's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it? And if I'm Cleveland, I think he legitimately gives you a shot to beat Golden State. So, to me, that seems like the perfect marriage. I don't know. It obviously would be more complicated than that contract-wise and stuff, but it probably could be figured out, I would think.
It's a risky move, though, because you don't have any assurances of LeBron James's future. So that you get rid of that Brooklyn pick, that's risky, definitely, for sure.
Well, he's coming to Philly next year. Everyone knows that.
Look, LeBron James's future with the Cleveland Cavaliers is to own the Cleveland Cavaliers. It's just a matter of when. That's what his big long-term thing is. So I agree. I totally understand where you're coming from, Adrian, saying, well, we're not sure. But you know what? You were an awful organization before LeBron. The only reason you're good is because of LeBron. To me, I would bend over backwards, make sure he's happy, and I would say, look, do you want Boogie here? And if you want Boogie here, we will make the move. But if you don't and you're not 100% sure you want Boogie, we're not going to trade for him.
Yeah, it's fair.
Let's move on, guys, to the big game on Monday night we just watched. I would argue might have been the best college football game of the year. Alabama adds another trophy to their trophy case from Georgia over the win over Georgia. Just saying things like an unbelievable game is the easy thing. So here's the hard question. Is Nick Saban the greatest coach of all time in college football?
Woo! I'll tell you what, it takes a lot of balls to make a quarterback switch like that at halftime in a national championship game. And he also did it with his running back. So Najee Harris came in and killed it in the second half. But at the same time, it's pretty easy to make a change when you have 5-star recruits on your bench, huh? So that was an amazing performance by Tua Tavo. God, how do you say his name? Tagovailoa.
Keep fighting through it, baby. We believe in you.
Tua Tagovailoa. I got it. So obviously he was the guy that was going to lead them back in it with his arm. But that last play, what the hell was that about? To cover 2, the safety was real late on that play. You had a 3-by-1 with four wide receivers in that package. Georgia have been in cover 2 on that play.
Tony, can I hop in on this one?
Please.
All right. So,
Tua looked him off, but that's still no excuse for the safety. is inexcusable.
There's two faults here. So the coverage that we saw at Georgia, it was a cover 6 look. Now, cover 6 is a combination of cover 2 and cover 4. So as Adrian said, 3-by-1 set, meaning 3 receivers to Tua's right, 1 receiver to the left. So to the defense's left, the Georgia defense was in a cover 4, meaning it's a quarters coverage. So the corner has 1/4 of the field. That safety over the top has 1 corner. Now backside, in the single side receiver, it's a cover 2 look, meaning that corner has the flats, the other safety has the middle of the field. The easy thing is most people can say, what the hell was this safety doing? He's guarding space, and that's the obvious answer. But the other fault is the fact that when you watch this play, that corner gives him no help. He gets no press. He gets no bump off you not always have to be in press coverage when you're in cover 2, but you do need to reroute the receiver because as you'll watch it, that receiver runs straight down the field. And there's no way that the safety is really able to get over the top perfectly. It's just a complete mess. Shout out to that Alabama staff after giving up a huge sack saying, you know what we're going to do in 2nd and long? We're going to run 4 verts because if you don't get it on 4 verts, 3rd down, you're out of field goal range now. So you're in a nightmare situation. So you want to talk about a set? There's a big set there and the Alabama offensive coaching staff for making that play call.
Yeah.
I think personally, guys, I think that Saban is the greatest coach of all time. And let me kind of read you guys a couple different reasoning I wrote down here. The first thing, every class that Coach Saban has recruited has a national championship ring. Think about how incredible that statement is, that when Alabama staff goes out and recruits can say, look, we can guarantee you not only that you will play in a national championship, you will win a national championship. There's never been a coach in college athletics, period, that can say that. Coach Saban has never had a losing record. In all of his time at LSU, Michigan State, and Alabama, he's never had a losing record. He has 6 national championships, and he's won 1 with LSU and Alabama. The only other coach that I can think of who has won a national championship with a different program has been Urban Meyer at Ohio State. So, the rationale of Saban being the greatest coach of all time, I'm not a fan of his. I'll admit this. I don't like dynasties, but I have a hard time saying he's not the greatest coach of all time.
5 titles in 9 seasons. At Bama, that's remarkable. I mean, geez. And this wasn't even the best Bama team. This wasn't even close to being the best Bama team, and they still won it all.
Adrian, going back to a comment you made, he changed quarterbacks at halftime in
a national championship game. That's insane.
With a freshman that he changed it to. It's not like he changed it from a senior to a senior. He went to a freshman.
Yeah. Chip Kelly is calling Alabama. He wants a transfer. He wants Tua to come to UCLA, just like Mariota.
Yeah, I don't like Saban, but that's because of some of the comments he made during election time and whatnot, and I won't get into that. But, yeah, I mean, right now, like you just said, 5 out of 9. I mean, and to make that change in halftime, I mean, yeah, the guy – if he's not the greatest coach of all time, he's hands down the greatest coach of this past, 20, 30, 40 years, this generation at least.
No question. And I think the scariest thing about this is that was a minus, quarterback. That was a pretty veteran team in Georgia, and that was Bama winning with a freshman quarterback, a freshman running back, a freshman left tackle who came in halfway through the game, and a freshman receiver who was making big plays. That's the scary thing to me about college football is that Alabama won a national championship with freshmen at key positions.
Yeah. Deshaun actually said something kind of sort of along these lines on Twitter. That Saban, they have such incredible depth that he's able to coach his team as if you were playing NCAA football on PlayStation when you're in your 8th or 9th year in a dynasty, because you're just absolutely stacked. And, I mean, Alabama is literally the only school that could do that.
it was like watching a baseball playoff game. You know, in a playoff game, you kind of throw all the rules out the window and you know, you kind of put in there who you want to put in there. Your starting pitcher might only last a couple innings before you pull them. So that was a game where, you know, it was it wasn't, you know, against the script. It wasn't the script there. He did something different. He did something that all of us said would have been crazy, but he went and did it anyway, and they won it all.
And you know what, guys? In 3 years, we'll be talking about both of those quarterbacks we watch as first-round potential NFL draft picks.
Oh, yeah. Jake Fromm's good, too.
Yeah. I was just about to say, let's not take any away from Fromm either, because he's definitely an NFL player. Brendan, remember you and I a few weeks ago, we were talking about how growing up there was a handful of left-handed quarterbacks in the league.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Vic, Brunell, Matt Leinart, you know what I mean? There's a few guys, and you mentioned how there's literally not a single guy on an NFL roster, including practice squad, that's left-handed.
Correct.
Well, yeah, that's going to change in a couple years with Tua.
Yeah.
No question about it.
No more Kellen Moore.
The only other player that really, I think, solidified, and I'm a huge draft guy. First off, Sony Michel's a dude. I don't think Sony Michel is going to end up being a first-round pick. I think he's going to be a top 40 pick. He's going to be very highly drafted, very similar to what happened with Delvin Cook, I think is what's going to happen with Sony Michel next year. But the guy who solidified himself was Roquan Smith. That dude is a missile all over the field.
The way he goes sideline to sideline, unbelievable.
Oh, my gosh. He reminds me a lot of Telvin Smith of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes, he's a little undersized, but just a missile. I mean, he is going to be a treat for whoever drafts him.
I like that comparison a lot, actually. That's good. That's a good one.
That was the guy who, you know, was a first-round pick. And the other cool thing, and Tony, you and me always talk about this, about, you know, bloodlines. How about the Ridley brothers? You know, having one on Georgia and one on Bama, and both of them had big games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the little brother had a bigger game than the bigger brother.
And Big Brother's going to be a first-round pick. I mean, that's just unbelievable bloodlines. You know, you talk about the NFL draft.
Yeah, Mims was the guy I was curious to see how he would play for Georgia. I kind of liked him a little bit this season, but he was kind of taken out of it. So you had the younger brother Ridley step up in his place, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they had that left shoulder injury there, and that was Jake Fromm's go-to guy. You know,
they love that back shoulder ball.
Yeah, they talked in nauseation about how much Jake and him, you know, worked a ton together. And then obviously when he goes out, that was, to me, one of the more impressive things is this is a freshman quarterback who hasn't played Bama. Saban has had almost an entire year of film on him, and Jake Fromm still played remarkably well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so before go ahead, Tony.
It makes me feel really old that they kept mentioning how he was playing Little League Baseball in 2011.
Yeah, that's interesting a little bit.
I like juniors at Temple in 2011.
All right, quickly transition before we feel too old now. Now, I want to talk about one more quick college thing before we talk about Major League Baseball. This came out today, guys. Our former head coach of our alma mater, Matt Rule, interviewed with the Indianapolis Colts. I'm just going to leave it at that and let the two of you just say, go talk about it, because I don't know what to say right now.
What the hell are the Colts thinking? Like, what the hell did they see from Matt Rule at Baylor this season that thinks he's qualified to be an NFL head coach? And I bet Matt Rule right now wishes he never left Broad Street.
I don't know. If I'm Matt Rule, I would go. I'd get the hell out of Baylor. I'd get the hell out of Texas. And yeah, I would hope Andrew Luck is healthy and go try to coach him up for the next 15 years.
If I'm Coach Rule, I'm not leaving that interview without signing on the dotted line. You don't even have to tell me how much you're going to pay me. I'm just going to sign it and just keep moving. You know, I think we all kind of unfortunately saw the Baylor situation not being a great situation to go into. You know, they obviously had scholarship limitations. They had a whole bunch of off-the-field, you know, issues going on in there. And we're in Texas here. Like you have A&M, you have Texas, you have Houston, you have SMU, there's countless good football teams. It's not like you're going into a state where you automatically are the school. So, for Coach Rule, look, the simple fact remains, if you get asked to do an interview with an NFL team, you take the interview every single time. It doesn't matter if you're at Alabama or if you're Abilene Christian. You get the interview, you take the interview, because there's not many jobs in football, college, and NFL that are even to that. There's probably a handful of college gigs that are equal to NFL gigs, but at the same time, I had a good friend of mine who's coached in the NFL and has coached in college, and I asked him the differences in structure, and he said it's really simple. In the NFL, you have one boss, and that's the owner. In college, you have thousands of bosses because everyone who's a big-name donor thinks they have the right to tell you what to do. So, if you have the opportunity to go coach in the NFL, absolutely go and do it.
100% agree.
Yeah, on top of it, I mean, I think people have kind of forgotten how good Andrew Luck is because he's been hurt.
I agree with that too. Yeah. Do people still consider him a top 5 quarterback anymore?
Yeah, I mean, I know that the front office is a mess, and who knows where you're getting into there. But the bottom line is, yeah, you're still getting a chance to coach a guy who's still pretty young and considered pretty fucking special.
Yeah. Do you take Saquon Barkley at number 3, or do you trade back, accumulate as many picks as you can, and try to fill those holes as much as possible?
Who? Indy?
Yeah, I feel like some team is going to try to trade up to number 3 to take a quarterback, kind of like what we've been seeing the last couple of years. And if they can get a haul, I would try and trade back and try and fill as many of those holes as possible, because there's a lot of them on defense and that offensive line.
Yeah, see, my thing, and Brendan and I have talked about this. If you're drafting in the top 5 or the top 10, I mean, yeah, Barkley is absolutely incredible. Barkley he's probably better than Zeke Elliott. He's probably better than Todd Gurley. But at the same time, if your team drafting that high, you're drafting that high for a reason. And no matter what, you're probably not truly going to be ready to compete for at least another 4 or 5 years. You're going through a total rebuild. So Are you going to draft a running back that high when you could take, any other position should be, linemen, trench guys? Because by the time you're actually ready to compete, I mean, it's the NFL. Running back, he's probably going to be on his decline by his 5th, 6th year. So
that's a good point.
As special as he is, to me, a team that should draft Barkley is going to be a team that's going to trade up into the top 5 or 10 or whatever it'll take to get him. Because if I'm a team in a complete rebuild, running back is one of the last positions I'm trying to fill.
There's two
ways.
They
also need a line for him to run behind, too. Sorry, Brent, I cut you off.
Yeah.
No, you're right. There's 2 ways to look at this. If you draft a running back and you are willing to model your entire offense based off of him, Gurley, Zeke, and then last year, Leonard Fournette. Look what the Jags did. The Jags went from 3-13 to being a 10-win team. So in one side of the coin, I can understand why you would draft Saquon Barkley, because there's no question in my mind he is the best player in this draft, bar none. There is no player who is as talented as him, and I think there's a large gap. So I get why you would draft him. However, if this was the draft last year, I would have said, hey, go ahead, Colts, draft the top running back, who was Leonard Fournette last year, and then, let it go. But because the running back position is so deep this year, I talked about Sony Michel being an early 2nd-round pick, I would trade back, get more picks, and then you can still get a really good running back late in the 1st, early in the 2nd, and then hopefully add things like the offensive line so, Andrew Luck isn't put together by a stick of bubble gum by the end of the season.
Yeah.
Yeah, they built that entire team around Luck the wrong way. They've been building from the outside in. They need to get guys to protect him, or they need to get guys on the other side of the ball to rush the passer and stop the opposing team. That's how I would do it.
I heard a quote once from one of the assistant coaches of the Indianapolis Colts when he was on the staff with Peyton Manning. And someone asked this assistant coach, "Hey, coach, why don't you practice more with the backups?" And coach turned to him and said, "Because if 18 goes down, we're fucked. And we don't practice fucked." And
Yeah,
when I read that, I said to myself, that oddly makes total sense. So I can understand, the Colts, but I would probably trade back. I think there's just too many needs there.
I'm curious to see what the Browns do. I know Tony just made the point about you shouldn't be drafting a running back, especially, we look at the Browns right now. But you talked about also, Brendan, what happened with Fournette and the Jags this year. Well, the Browns actually don't have a bad offensive line.
Very true.
It's actually not bad at all. So I'm curious to see if the Browns go and take Barkley at 1, because of some of the reports I've been hearing, it seems like they might like Josh Allen, and they don't like Josh Rosen. So I'm curious to see, do they go Barkley at 1, and they use their number 4 pick to take the quarterback instead of at number 1?
I think that's a fair thought process there, Adrian. I think it's also fair to say, what about a guy like Alex Smith or Tyrod Taylor? Or it's probably the biggest stretch, but Kirk Cousins. I don't think it's a stretch to see the Browns say, you know what, let's see if we can trade for a veteran quarterback and try to draft someone like a Barkley, and then maybe draft a, Nick Chubb, or Bradley Chubb out of NC State then at 4.
Yeah.
I don't think that's a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, and that defense wasn't terrible this year by any means. I believe they led the NFL in yards per carry allowed. They were a really good run defense. So, maybe the Browns aren't as far as we think they are. I don't know.
It's hard
They
to
could
say.
also draft. Go ahead.
I said it's hard to say they're not as far as we thought they were when they're having a parade for 0-16.
Yeah, right.
They could also draft another pass rusher to go alongside, what's his face?
Garrett.
Miles Garrett.
Yeah, and then you could potentially have like an elite pass rush, which is a hell of a way to start.
I mean,
That's what the Texans tried to do with Clowney and Watt.
And that's what the Broncos won their Super Bowl based off of. So I can get behind that too. But let's transition here, guys. We'll dive far more deeper into the NFL as we move forward.
Yeah, we completely went away from the topic.
Well, let's get into a little Major League Baseball, and a topic that I will admit I am the weakest in. So I will do more facilitating here and let you guys talk more. The big thing in Major League Baseball offseason was obviously the Marlins, trade to the New York Yankees. Tony, I want you to lead off here. Baseball is your big bread and butter. Do you have a problem with what the Marlins did?
Do I have a problem with it? I have a problem with the league, with how they transferred ownership to the ownership group that currently has the Marlins. It was a group that doesn't have the money for it. Then they put in a figurehead to run the team in Derek Jeter, who has no experience. They traded away Giancarlo Stanton, who's probably a top 5 player, and also Marcell Ozuna, who is one of the most underrated players in baseball. He's probably a top 20 or 25 player. And they didn't get back a single top 100 prospect for either of those guys. They should have got back 5 or 6. It's kind of a joke that, see, I am against a salary cap in baseball, but when shit like this happens, it kind of makes me think there should be some type of a salary floor. Now, with that said, I'm obviously a Phillies fan, and the Phillies haven't spent even close to the amount of money they could have in the past few years. But on the other hand, the Phillies also were clearly in a rebuild, and you could clearly see what they were doing. And the Phillies also are about to spend a ton of money this upcoming offseason. So yeah, I feel bad for the 7 Marlins fans that live in Miami. But because that team, actually had a chance to win. It's awful what happened to Jose Fernandez.
Yeah.
But Jose Fernandez and that core with Stanton, Yelich, Ozuna, even Justin Bour, D. Gordon is all right. Like, that team actually could have made a run. And now, I mean, probably going to end up trading Yelich, or probably going to end up trading Real Muto. Pitching was already awful. I mean, there are literally going to be AAA teams that have more talent on the field than Miami Marlins this year. And it's a shame because there's no, Houston did that a few years ago, but Houston had a clear idea and a clear blueprint of what they were doing. The Cubs did that a few years ago and had a clear blueprint of what they were doing. The Marlins are just throwing shit against the wall with a figurehead who has World Series rings but has no business running a fucking team. And that's what's fucked up about the situation.
You mentioned something about the salary cap, and that obviously there isn't one in baseball. How many MLB teams do you think can actually afford Giancarlo Stanton's contract?
Like 5.
Yeah, that'd be my guess.
There's the problem right there.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe a little, but yeah. I mean, you're talking New York and only the Yankees because the Mets are extremely cheap. Phillies could afford them. Dodgers could afford them. Cubs could afford them. I mean, outside of that, yeah, there's some teams that have to make some pretty drastic changes to be able to afford a guy like that. But at the same time, he's worth every fucking penny.
Oh yeah,
I mean, he's legit. Bryce Harper is gonna sign. I think he's gonna sign $500 million this offseason, or damn close to it. And he's also going to be worth every penny. He's like, the idea that the contract is ridiculous isn't really accurate. He's being paid market value.
Yeah. It's just it's the length.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that when the Marlins were sold, Marlins fans would think, you know what? Jeffrey Lurie treated us better than Derek Jeter did. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of Marlins fans are thinking. I understand that when you're and Adrian, that was a great point you made about there's not a lot of teams who even can afford him. So I understand, hey, if you can't afford him, trade him, go cheap, go the Astros route, and they obviously won the World Series this year with this model of let's try to grow homegrown talent. Let's try to have our players grow up. But Tony hit the nail on the head. If you're not getting multiple high-end prospects, then what are you really getting? And that's really what the bummer here for baseball is. And what I really want to ask you guys, maybe you guys have seen this, but Dan Le Batard had Rob Manfred on, his show and just absolutely went at him. Just absolutely ripped into him saying, how could you let this happen? And Rob Manfred essentially said, it's not our job to know. Did either of you guys have a problem with Le Batard going after him like that, or do you think Le Batard was in the right?
I think Le Batard was in the right, but at the same time, Manfred wasn't exactly wrong either. You don't want the commissioner to stick their nose into ownership situations too much, but the situation like this was unique. See, I think that I've mentioned this before to you, Brendan. Both Florida franchises are in huge trouble right now. The only difference is that the Marlins just built that beautiful new stadium with taxpayer dollars, but neither the Marlins or the Rays can fill their stadiums up enough to sustain a team long enough over the course of years. You know what I mean? I feel like, and I don't know how feasible this would be, but I know the stadiums are in place, and I know certainly the popularity is there. Is it a ridiculous thought that one of those franchises could play half their home games in Tampa or Miami and split the other half between Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Cuba? Ooh. So you'd play 40. You'd play 41, say, in Miami, and you'd split the rest up in the other 3 places. To me, long term, like long term, I'm talking, 10, 20 years, I feel like that might be the only way to save those franchises in Florida. And obviously both of them wouldn't be able to do it. But I feel like the team that tries it might be onto something there. But that's just kind of a crazy idea.
Yeah. Now, I'm not really sure what Le Batard actually said, but here's what I'll say about the Marlins. I mean, obviously, they've been scarred by this already. This has happened before several times. But obviously, they have at least won world championships, 1997, 2003. But the year after those championships, they always gutted the team because, well, they didn't have enough money. So they wanted to slash payroll. And that's what they've always done. And I don't know what Le Batard said, but I'm sure he's just extremely frustrated having to go through it again.
Yeah. It's also kind of a catch. Well, because I think their perception is that people don't care about baseball in Florida, and that's not even close to accurate. I mean, people love baseball in Florida. But the problem is so many people that live in Florida are transplants and are, Northeast who grew up in other parts of the country and are Yankees fans or are Phillies fans or are Red Sox fans. And those teams, I mean, the Marlins came into existence in, 93 and Tampa in, 97 or something like that. So they just don't have the history. And it, like I said, it's kind of a catch-22 because it's going to take years to actually have fan bases with multiple generations and stuff. And I just don't know if I can make it.
And Tony, I'm going to take that comment you just made there a step further. Because there's so many relocated fans there in the Southeast, especially Florida, not only are these people, from Philadelphia, New York, etc., they're also close to minor league teams for the Phillies and for the Yankees and for the Mets and for the Red Sox. So to them, the mindset could be, why would I go watch the Rays play when I can go see the future Yankees play for half the price, and then I can go and see the Yankees play when they play in the Rays every couple times a year? I don't disagree with you, Tony. I think the idea you propose is really interesting. I think the Marlins are the more realistic option for that, exactly like you said. They already have the infrastructure and the money in place in the stadium, so they can't go anyway. The Rays need to move. One of the things that I had heard was Major League Baseball was talking expansion. And to me, before you talk expansion, you need to make sure that your current teams are all functioning, and the Rays are so far from it. So we've heard, teams like areas like Montreal and Charlotte be areas that were mentioned of potential expansions. Why not just move the Rays there? That stadium is a dump. You can move them to those places. Or the city I would love to see most, move them to Mexico City, because Mexico City will pack them in. I feel very confident about that. And I think that is the easiest sport of all the professional sports to go abroad and be successful day one.
Yeah, we had talked about this a couple weeks ago. I totally agree. If MLB is supposedly thinking about expanding, but yeah, they need to clean up their messes first, and their messes are both in Florida. The two cities that actually they were talking about is bring a team back to Montreal, which I wouldn't be opposed to, because Montreal actually had a decent fan base for a long time, and it was more stadium issues why they left. And the other place was Portland, which I like the idea of a team in Portland, but I don't know. That's awfully close to Seattle. You mentioned Charlotte. I think Charlotte could support a team, but the East Coast is the last place they want to expand to. I completely agree with Mexico City. Mexico City has 25 million people population-wise. Baseball's popular there. They would probably thrive there. But I think they really should look into a team in Puerto Rico. Travel-wise, it wouldn't be very much different than traveling to Miami. I mean, what would it be, an extra hour by plane? I mean, seriously, what difference would it make? And I definitely think a team could survive in Puerto Rico.
I like that idea, because we've seen that in the NFL with the Jaguars, and they've kind of experimented with that, even playing a game in Mexico City this year between the Raiders and Patriots. And we've seen that even with the Bills in the past, where they played a couple games in Canada, I So in Toronto, I like that. Maybe not play half the games, but definitely experiment with it. I think that's an idea that might actually come to fruition in a couple years from
now. Yeah.
Let's talk a little more Phillies baseball because we haven't really, brought it close to home. So, the Phillies, obviously they have a new signing there, and then there's also roomies of Manny Machado. So, guys, you're the experts in baseball. How excited should I be as a below-average baseball fan about these two names being mentioned with the Philadelphia Phillies?
I'm sorry, Machado and who else? Who? Say that again.
I think he meets Carlos Santana.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, all right, I'll hit on Santana first because they actually have him. When I first heard the signing, well, actually, I heard a few months ago, it was rumored that the Phillies were interested, and it was kind of a head-scratcher because you thought Rhys Hoskins was kind of no doubt the everyday first baseman for the next 10 years. Then you thought more into it and you realized that Hoskins might actually turn into a better left fielder than first baseman. The reason Hoskins looked so out of place in left field last year is because he hadn't played it since college, but he actually played more outfield in college than he did first base. And it's not like he was anything ever better than an average first baseman. So adding a guy like Santana, yeah, you wish he was a little bit younger, but it's not like he's old. I think he's 31. He's a really good player. He's very underrated, and he does exactly what this new age baseball, what Kapler is trying to do, what Clentak is trying to acquire, and that he gets on base, and when he hits the ball, he hits it far. It's not rocket science. He hits home runs and he walks. And he's also a very good first baseman. So all of a sudden, with Santana, Hoskins, J.P. Crawford, all of a sudden you have a bunch of guys who you project to have real high on-base percentages. Cesar Hernandez is another guy who gets on base. Odubel Herrera is another guy who's shown flashes of getting on base at a really high level. All these guys have also shown pop, and the Phillies actually I don't think are as far away from contending as some people realize.
Yeah, when the signing initially happened, I was like, man, what are they doing signing a 31-year-old? Aren't they trying, kind of rebuild a little bit, try to let the younger players play? But when you look more into it, I do like the signing. And Tony, you hit the nail on the head with the on-base percentage. And a lot of the Phillies fans, they wanted to look at that batting average. They're like, ew, 259 last year? Like, what's so great about that? But he's going to walk like 100 times a year. And that just puts more runners on base for guys like Rhys Hoskins to bring him home.
Yeah. And it also, a guy like Santana, people don't realize because he's a big, chunky first baseman, he actually could run kind of a little bit. I mean, he's not a base stealer, but
he's not agile for his size.
Yeah. He's not a base clogger. He actually led off for Cleveland quite a bit. So he's a guy you could line up pretty much anywhere 1 through 4 if you want to. And Kapler has mentioned that Kapler is going to piss off a lot of old guys in Philly, and I'm going to love it because he's not the type that's going to have, your set 1 through 8 and then pitcher batting 9th lineup. He's literally going to take the lineup game by game, matchup by matchup, and go from there. So on Tuesday night, Santana might be leading off. On Wednesday night, he might be batting third. And then Friday and Saturday, he might be batting cleanup. So it's all well and good for me.
Yeah, that's like Joe Madden. Every night we saw a new lineup from him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now with Machado, I know you wanted to mention Machado. Obviously Baltimore has to trade him because he's going to be a free agent. There's no way they could re-sign him. Whether it happens this offseason or at the deadline, who knows? I don't know. I kind of have mixed opinions on him because, don't get me wrong, he's an elite player. He's probably on his way to Hall of Fame. Although last year he wasn't nearly as good as he's been in the past. My only hesitation with giving up the farm for him would be, obviously he's another guy who's going to sign $300 or $400 million contract. I would much rather them have Bryce Harper than Manny Machado, because you wouldn't have to give up a ton of prospects for Harper, because Harper's also going to be a free agent, and Harper's just a better player. Not that Manny Machado isn't also a top 5 player, but Harper is, he's just better. So if I'm the Phillies and I have to choose between one or the other, because the Phillies have a ton of money, but I don't think they're going to be able to have 2 guys making $400 or $500 million. I would not hedge my bets, but I would just kind of wait until next offseason, because I'm almost positive that there's no way Washington re-signs Harper and he becomes a free agent. And especially with the Yankees signing Stanton, you would kind of think that takes them out of the Harper sweepstakes next offseason. So that's one less team. I think Harper is really going to come down to Cubs, Dodgers, Phillies.
Mm. Yeah, Machado, the thing with him, obviously, is if you trade for him, you better make sure you extend him. So
right.
I'm not giving up the farm for him either.
I am a huge Bryce Harper fan. I am a huge fan of anyone who is over the top and exciting for me, because I'm not a big baseball fan. I'll admit that right off the jump. So I love the guys who are over the top and, exactly like you said, Tony, really get under the skin of all those old baseball players, all those old baseball fans. So I would love to see him in Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia has a soft spot in their heart for the guys who are just over the top. I think about guys like Nick Young, Swaggy P, Lou Williams, Allen Iverson, even T.O. for a while. He was really well-liked. Guys that were just
Lenny
Dykstra, Danny Carcello. There's just a ton of guys. I think he would just thrive in the Philadelphia media. I agree with you, Tony. I don't think he's realistic for the Yankees, because if the Yankees signed him, they would have $1 billion outfield. To put this in perspective to maybe people who aren't huge baseball fans, the New World Trade Center costs $3 billion. So they would have 1/3 of the World Trade Center would be the value of the Yankees outfield. That said, the Yankees are the only professional team in the world who would even consider doing that.
There's only 3 men in the outfield. You can put a whole lot more in that trade center.
Absolutely. If that rate, that would say if the Yankees continue to spend that, their starting lineup would be equal to the expense of the World Trade Center.
Their entire lineup probably equals all the teams combined.
Yeah, the Yankees outfield the Yankees outfield payroll alone is going to be more than probably bottom 10 teams in the league. But I agree with you. Philly would absolutely love Harper. Absolutely love Harper. He fights. He's got the long hair and the helmet comes off when he runs, and he fucking hustles. And not that they wouldn't love Machado, because Machado has kind of a surly attitude too, in a good way. But yeah, to me, and Harper also. Not that this really means anything, but he's also said quite a few times how much he likes hitting in Philly and how much he likes the Philly fans. So that's something to consider. I 100% expect the Phillies to be legitimate players for Harper next offseason. Like I've said, man, LeBron and Harper are coming to Philly next year, so I'm glad.
All right, this is a good time to segue off this topic before Tony is going to sign Tom Brady while they're at it.
No, I like Wentz more anyway.
Okay. Anyway, moving on now. I think one of the fun things that we wanted to do here is we always want to end our podcast with some funny, ridiculous news over the top. Just something over the top that you wouldn't find in your day-to-day that kind of leave you shaking your head. And I think I found a good one. Fellas, I want to hear from you if you think this is a genius ad campaign. IKEA recently came out with an exclusive coupon to mothers. Great. Makes a ton of sense. Until you find out how they determine this. IKEA's coupon is going for a crib that is valued at $1,000. I guess that's how much a crib is worth. I don't know. But in the lower bottom section of this ad, mothers or expecting mothers have to pee on the ad, and if they are pregnant, the new price comes up. Fellas, is this a genius marketing idea or the worst marketing idea?
I'm like a little bit like, what the fuck? They got to pee on a piece of paper? I don't know. I don't like it. I think it's weird.
Yeah, it sounds like someone in their marketing department has a really weird fetish and was able to finagle something that he would have otherwise ever been able to do in his life, and I'll just leave it at that.
I am all for different in life. I am all for being your own, making new, not being the cookie cutter. So on the surface, I like this. And then I thought more about this. Most IKEA cash register people are like 16, 17, 18 years old. These are like their first jobs. So their first job potentially is handling someone's pee paper. No, thank you. I think this is a horrific and just a gross idea. I like the fact that it's different, but you know what? Why don't you just bring in a pregnancy test? I mean, there's better ways to do this. I don't want a nice 17-year-old guy or gal, their first job, having to handle a woman's pee paper so that she can save $300 on a crib. No, thank you.
Can you imagine your first day at work, coming home, mom's like, hey, so how was work today? Well, first customer I had peed on a piece of paper. How'd your day go?
Oh, God.
This is America in 2018. Let's hope this does not continue.
Make America great again.
Well, guys, I appreciate everyone listening to our podcast today. We definitely ran a little longer than I think we all anticipated, but we hope you enjoyed it. We're going to try to continue this, do a weekly podcast from us moving forward. You can follow us on Twitter at Bert_and_TD. And Adrian, what about you? Where can they find you?
Yeah, just type in at Adrian Fedkiw, last name Fedkiw. So just type my name in there and you'll find me somewhere.
Awesome, guys. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. We're going to try to do these weekly, so please, by all means, continue to listen. Take care, guys. Appreciate it.